If you've ever been told you're scattered because you have too many passions, this episode might change how you see yourself forever. Welcome to Casa De Confidence, a podcast for you. You'll hear some incredible women
and some awesome, cool dudes
going confidently in the direction of their dreams and living in the purpose of their heart.
You're our host,
Julie DeLucca-Collins. And you are our sidekick. Hashtag handsome hot husband.
That again.
And the producer of the show.
That I am.
I am an author, speaker, coach, dreamer. And most of all,
we help people go in the direction of their dreams.
And support them on their purpose. So pull up a chair.
Grab a drink.
And make yourself at home. Because our casa
is your casa. Welcome back to Casa De Confidence. This is Dan, and I have my wonderful, incredible co-host and wonderful wife, Julie.
My name is Julie DeLucca-Collins, and I am married to the man behind the mic.
I'm the man behind the mic. I'm usually on the other side of the mic. But you know what? I want to say something. All preparation, and it doesn't always come out the way you wanted it.
No, it does not.
And we just recorded an intro for this episode.
And we did poorly.
And we asked Julie's little AI assistant to give us a little help with it.
And it was terrible.
Horrible. It was so bad.
It was terrible. Well, we like being ourselves better.
We like being ourselves.
And here's the thing. Sometimes we just feel like, okay, well, let's see what Chad has to say. We want to make sure that we do the right thing by the guest and say.
Maybe we missed something, a little factoid or a little
that we
tidbit.
want. Yeah, correct. That we want to make sure that we include. And when we looked at it, listen, nothing can really replace us as humans and our own intelligence and our own
intelligence?
Our own,
well, yeah.
I guess our own humanity.
We are.
In creativeness. That's what I was looking for.
Non-artificial intelligent.
There's nothing artificial about us, that's for sure.
What I have to say, though, is don't get me wrong. Nothing wrong with AI stuff. Actually, it's an incredible resource, and we use it. And we use it to help us along, but it shouldn't replace it shouldn't replace the humanity of what you're talking about. Use it as a tool, not as a replacement.
It's like a calculator. You should still know your timetables.
Absolutely.
But sometimes it just makes things easier.
Do you still know your timetables?
Yes, in Spanish. That's how I do math.
Español?
I always do math in Spanish. You know that.
Nuevo y nuevo.
That's new and new. That's not nueve y nueve son 18.
Well, I don't know Spanish. Ocho y ocho.
16, 16.
It's 64, Julie.
No,
you don't know your times tables.
No, you don't know your Spanish because you're saying 8 and 8 as opposed to 8 times 8.
But we're talking about the times tables.
Yeah, but why didn't you say, I forget what the word is in Spanish now
for
multiplying.
Oh, apparently you don't know Spanish that well yourself.
I guess I don't. Oh my gosh. See, okay.
Mm-hmm. Anyway.
You know what the machines are not going to be able to replace?
What?
Scattered brains.
That's kind of funny.
That's kind of funny indeed.
So,
listen, happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day, Julie.
That's right. We had a Valentine's Day unlike any other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I took my mom out and you stayed home.
Well, the evening before Valentine's Day, we all went out together.
That's right. Should we talk about that?
Well, let's not mention the restaurant, but we went to a restaurant that's having a soft opening. And
we wanted to support a brand new business.
We wanted to support them, but we ended up never getting served. But
and it took an hour to just get water.
Yeah. But we had a great conversation with the owner and said, you know what, when you are ready,
we're going to come
back with bells on.
And we want to support them.
We want to support you.
And here's one thing that I do want to, okay, I'm so glad we're talking about this. Mm-hmm. Because here's a couple different things to unpack from a business perspective. The owner, we had made reservations. I had made a reservation for 6:30 and we showed up and the girl said, "Oh, I don't have a reservation for you if you don't." And I said, "Well, I'm not sure if I made it because I never got a confirmation on the website." And she said, "Well, then you don't have a reservation." I said, "No, but I'm pretty sure I do." And I said, "Well, would like to sit down." And she's like, "No, we can't serve you." And I look around and there's tons of tables that are open. And I thought, And here was a teaching moment for this young girl, and I didn't see an adult anywhere, but that's probably because everybody was in the kitchen trying to get things done. And I said, "Well, can you check your list to see if I'm on the list?" And there's no list. There's like little pieces of papers on the table. And then she finds her name, and it's at the bar. And there's no way we can sit at the bar with my mom because these stools were very shishi stools that I probably would have fallen out of. And I said, "No, that we can't sit there with my mom. Can we sit at a table?" And she said, "Well, I don't have any tables." And I said, "Well, what about this one right here?" She's like, "Well, that's reserved." And she's like, "I can sit you at the booth." And I said, "I'm sorry, it's 3 of us. And I don't even think my husband is going to fit in one side of the booth. My butt probably wouldn't have fit with my mom in the booth anyhow." So then I said, "Well, what about this table?" And I look and I said, "It says that the reservation on this one is for 5 p.m.
No, 5:30.
No, it was 5 p.m.
Oh, 5 p.m. She's like, "Oh, it's 6:20."
And she's like, and it was 6:45. Thank you very much. And then and I said to her, and I said, "Well, can we just sit here?" And she's like, "Okay, but if they come, you have to move."
And then she goes, "No." And at the end, she's like, "Oh, wait a minute. They were supposed to be here at 5, like you said."
Anyway,
they're out.
They're out. And so here's the lesson. And I want to point out another lesson too from there. Not from there.
What was the lesson in that?
So here's the lesson, that you don't have to wait to be perfect to start. And there's a lot of different things that I hope that this business owner, he admitted, right? He's understaffed. He needs to do more. But when you're starting something imperfectly, make sure that you also have people who maybe have gone before you, and surround yourself with them. Because had he, maybe invited another restaurant owner from the chamber or from the area to say, "Hey, what am I missing?" Right? Or have brought someone anybody, whether it be the bartender or whether it be the somebody else, right, to help him. It would have been a little not chaotic because it's still a grand opening. It's still a soft opening, and there's imperfection, and that's fine. And that's how you learn. But it would have been the I don't know, much easier. And we're going to go back because we love to support small businesses. But I think that's an issue.
I have to say, as a patron, sometimes in this case, you have to give a little grace. And in this case, I could see what was going on in the background. I could hear the conversations, and I knew they weren't ready.
Yeah, we gave them grace. After 1 hour of waiting for our water.
But we were just hanging out, having a conversation. We had no place to go. So because we had the ability just to hang out afterwards, instead of getting angry and mad, we had a conversation with them. And,
And he's invited us to go back. And he says that he's going to give us 50% off, which we probably won't take advantage of. But it's nice
we went a couple doors down and had a great pub food.
A wonderful English pub food, and had a good time. My mom said it's the best meal she's ever had. So I'm happy for that.
So Julie.
Wait, before we move on, I have one more other thing I want to say.
Okay.
So yesterday I went to get a couple gifts before we were meeting my friend and our family friend for high tea at the Norwich Spa.
You sound fancy.
And I wanted to get a couple knickknacks, for the ladies who were joining me.
Did you give the dog a bone?
And I did not. So then I sat there in line. There is a huge line to check out. I only have 3 things. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm standing in this line. So the people in front of me at the cashier decide that they're going to pay with cash, which nothing wrong with that. And they paid with a $50 bill. Okay. And the line behind me is stretching out through the aisles of this place. And the cashier then says, "Oh, do you have anything else?" And like, "No, we only have cash." So he had to go and call the manager through the speaker for the manager to come in. And I thought, well, maybe there's a new system that the manager has to punch in, yes, and accept that they're getting cash or whatever. No, the managers just came in to see and put the $50 bill to the light to see if it was a forgery kind of bill. And I thought, this is poor customer service, because now we have to wait for the manager to come in to check that the bill was not a forgery. Yet, don't they have those pens? And by the way, there was no apology from the manager to everybody standing in line. And the thing that blew me away is the manager chose not to even open another register when they saw that the chaos, and proceeded to go back to the back. And I just think that in business, there's the little things that we can do to make it easier. And we're not always going to get it perfect, but we have to see, like, how can I do this in a different way to get a better result for the people that I'm servicing? And I think that that's just a teaching moment.
Oh, I get it. It's kind of like when you have a system.
Yeah.
And you're so adherent to that system that you forget to listen to the voice of the customer. You let the system lead your service. And I think people will tend to forget sometimes that it should be the customer that leads to what you provide for that service, and you build the system to serve the customer. So, yeah, it's a great lesson.
And I think that, one of the things that brings it kind of back to the conversation with our guest today is that a lot of times there's so many distractions in our world, and as entrepreneurs or even individuals, right? We become scared to be seen, scared to fail, scared to succeed, scared to commit. And we share in the conversation with Tigrilla that plants can't run away, they're rooted. So they adapt, they transform to their environment, and they respond intelligently. And this is such a good lesson for us, rather than trying to run away of the circumstances, trying to run away from things that are hard. We need to learn to adapt and just be more malleable, because once we do that and we root ourselves where we are with our beliefs, with our values, everything, then we can weather the storm.
I know you said it earlier. And you said the word scattered.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember in the interview her saying something that was really cool. He says, you're not scattered, you're living in an ecosystem.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's like the ecosystem isn't trying to be one thing. It's interconnected.
Yeah.
And you're not scattered. You just have a lot of things in your brain, in your business that are feeding off of each other. And that's, when you start thinking of it that way, it can be calming, really.
And when we understand that there's an ecosystem and that we have a safety of individuals that can support us, then that really increases our confidence. And, when we have doubts, which are going to happen, right? Doesn't mean that we are going to fail because we have doubts. We're going to fail because we're human, but having doubts doesn't preclude us from saying that we're not confident, because confidence isn't pretending we don't have them. Confidence is doing the work and learning to trust yourself and leaning into your ecosystem for support.
Cool. A little about Tigrilla. She is a nature-inspired mentor. She's a certified coach, and she works with multi-passionates and divergent creatives. And she lives in Italy, northern Italy.
She lives in a very interesting community, Dan. Have you ever remember when we had the interview?
Yes.
And we talked about, how, we may need to look at Italy. She lives in Damanhur, which is a spiritual community in northern Italy. And it is a great place for multi-passionates and divergent creatives and soul rebels, like she calls them, to align and create this wonderful supportive community.
Yeah. I liked when she talked about forest bathing.
Ooh, I love forest bathing.
When she talked about that?
Yes. Forest bathing. And by the way, I learned forest bathing from when I went to one of the retreats from the No BS group, and we were talking about that. But the first time I heard it, I'm like, what? Walk in the forest naked? But no, forest bathing is how our presence can change the stress response that we have. And that could be walking in the woods, or maybe in your neighborhood, or just being present in the moment and allowing your presence in that particular moment to really be able to help you be at peace, as opposed to allowing your brain to be all over the place and be reactive, as opposed to mindful, I guess is the word.
Gotta apologize to the audience. I didn't hear a thing that Julie said. All I kept thinking about was her walking naked through the forest.
Oh my God. Really, Dan? That's too much information for the audience. Please.
It was my movie, not yours.
Yeah, I guess so. Lord have mercy. Anyway, and
I think it's time to get along to this interview. What do you think, Julie?
Absolutely. I love this interview. I love this incredible creative. I love the work that she's doing and how she's supporting individuals. And more importantly, one of the things that I love is that we all live in such very different worlds that it's so cool to be able to meet others that are doing maybe a little bit of annex things, right? Something that is similar or can be the support system or the community too that we can build with, that can help us grow and really move forward to the types of dreams and desires and impact that we want to create, which I know that's one of the things that Tigrilla is doing in this world, is the way that she is supporting individuals and the way that she is just a nature-led coaching for humans who want freedom, not discipline. And if you're multi-passionate, this is the place for you to explore this conversation.
All right. So we're going to get into it now. Go grab a cup of coffee, take a walk, sit next to your favorite plant if you want to be a little extra, and let's jump into this conversation with Tigrilla and Julie.
My friends, welcome back to another episode of Casa De Confidence. Today, my question to you is, have you ever felt like your mind is a garden of wildflowers, colorful, full of potential, but totally untamed? I totally feel like that so many different days. I feel like, there's so many wildflowers growing, but we need to kind of tame it. And today's guest, Tigrilla Gardenia, says, you're not scattered. You're living in an ecosystem. She's a nature-inspired mentor and certified coach who works with multi-passionates, raising my hand, and neurodivergent creatives and soul rebels to bring their ideas into aligned action using the wisdom of plants. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by so many passions, this episode is for you, and it will help you find that through line and trust the rhythm of your own growth, my friends. I'm looking forward to this conversation because we're going to unpack so many different things. And Tigrilla is in a beautiful place in the world that I want to visit, and she's going to tell us all about it. So welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I love that introduction. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Well, I kept doing some of the research and thinking about the direction of the show today. I thought I could talk travel. I could talk music. We could talk a lot of different things.
Multipotentialites.
Multipotentialites, correct. And for people who are tuning in, who maybe had never heard that word, tell us, what is a multipotentialite?
So multipotentialite is a word that honestly, when I found it, I was so excited because basically people have been using a lot of negative terms to describe. And this is like the positive, which is a person who has many, many different interests that they're actually really good at, which means you could go in many different directions in life. And this leads you to maybe appear like you're jumping from one thing to the other. It might appear like you get really excited about something, then leave it for something else. It also oftentimes, believe it or not, makes you hold yourself back, because being really good at something, when you have somebody in front of you, a friend, a relationship of any sort, who maybe is only good at one thing, even if you're good at that, you'll tend to like leave that for that person. And so you sort of start to dim your light a little bit, because people are like, oh my God, are you good at that too? And you're like, kind of. So you can get totally on like down a rabbit hole and go into so many different subjects. And sometimes it gets taught like we get taught of how is it? Master, what is it? Oh, I forget it now. Jack of all trades, master of none. That's total crap. Like, I hate that phrase, because it's so not true. The multipotentialite is usually really good at a lot of things, but they still are breath. And they oftentimes think that they're very separate. Like everything I play the tuba over here, and then over here I'm an engineer, and over here I have a passion for crime. And over here I really like to go like forest bathing, and you're just sitting there going, what? How do these all fit together?
Oh, I love that. You know what? You were describing the story of my life.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I also, oh my gosh, forest bathing. This is something that I learned about, I would say maybe about 8-9 years ago, and it blew my mind. So for people who don't know what that is, tell us, what is that?
So forest bathing is this beautiful experience. It started in Japan. It's called Shinrin-yoku. And it started off because people are so disconnected to nature. They're so disconnected to themselves. I had this beautiful conversation with this wonderful eco-psychologist, where we kind of got to the heart of the fact that the original wound we all suffer from is actually disconnection from nature, because it disconnects us from our true essence. And forest bathing comes about when people are at the height of their stress, right? At the height of like, I am just sitting in an office and I'm totally disconnected. And it is a practice of deep conversation with nature in a very simple way. It's about we know that at least 20 minutes in a natural environment, whether we're talking about a park where I'm kind of immersed in it in any such way, already lowers my cortisol levels. Just 20 minutes lowers my cortisol levels by almost half. I mean, it's really an incredible perspective of de-stressing. And so forest bathing is an invitation to that. It usually happens over the course of a day or even multiple days. And it's just a soft walk through nature. You're guided by somebody who invites you to pay attention, to be present, to maybe sit with a leaf for a few minutes, to recognize the pattern that you're seeing in the forest, to sit near and touch the water of like a lake or a river. And so it is just a gentle immersion with invitations to connect.
Yeah. Connection is the one thing that we are all craving. And I think for so many of us, right, we don't create the space to be able to walk ourselves out of the noise of life and create the room for connections like we would in forest bathing, or, maybe relationships that go a little deeper than most. And that's what I'm hoping that through the conversations that we have on the podcast, that we can continue to not only help individuals, but really give them some of the tools, right, and reminders that we all need. So super excited that we have an opportunity to unpack a lot of this. Now, Tigrilla, will you say you're not scattered, that you're living in an ecosystem? And that's a powerful reframe. Can you take us back to the moment when you knew this truth for yourself or for somebody else?
Yeah, I totally can. So, because I remember it so well, it was such an impactful thing. So I am somebody who has, when I tell my life story, people look at me and ask me how old I am. They're like, you can't, like you can't. I have a background that comes from music engineering to high tech. I've worked with Cirque du Soleil. I've co-owned a circus. I've owned a company that does events. I've also been a spiritual teacher for many years. I've done marketing and research and different aspects. projects. I've been a biomimic working on EU projects. I mean, I literally have this weird gambit that doesn't have any kind of linear thread through it from the perspective of what other people see.
Right.
And so, I would get to this place where you always wonder when you switch from one thing to the other, am I just abandoning it? Am I like giving it up? Is this, does this come from a fear reflex or any kinds of stuff like that? And of course, it also makes it really hard to make a choice because you love so many things. And so you're like, I have so these options in front of me and I don't know which way to go. I have all these different ideas and I don't know how to work on them. And our way of thinking about things, which I'm sure we're going to get into deeper, doesn't fit any of the traditional molds that focus on discipline. Another word I hate, like focus. Discipline, all these types of things. Like that's what you need. I
know. And I often bring those into my vocabulary, but I'm with you. I
throw them out.
Discipline.
I throw them out. Yeah. And so I was in the Sacred Woods Temple here. So I live in Damanhur. It's one of the largest spiritual communities in the world. It is in northern Italy. It's an amazing place. I call it a cross between Hogwarts and Oz. Yeah. That's kind of what it is.
Yeah.
And so I was walking in the Sacred Woods Temple and I was looking around and I think I sat somewhere and I was just immersed. It's kind of a form of forest bathing. I was just immersed. And by this point, I had been working with the plants for quite a while, but I had started from the perspective of going back through my engineering, background. So I had come in through biomimicry, which is an entire way of designing software and designing social innovations and designing products connected to nature, inspired by nature. And I had started going down this thing. And then I was having these conversations, starting to open myself to really having conversations with plants. And as I was sitting around, I got this kind of clear, it's so hard to put into words, but clear signal that said, look around you.
Wow.
Nothing here is wasted. And in the sense that nature doesn't have a dump. There is no garbage where I go and I throw things out and I just leave them. Everything that and this was especially in a time I had spent probably from my 20s all the way through to that moment, which I was in my 40s at that time, all around the idea that something was wrong with me because I was somebody who had all these quote unquote negative traits, these ways of being and these ways of thinking about it that were too harsh and they were negative and all this stuff. And I was always looking at how do I get rid of them? The vocabulary, how do I get rid of these bad behaviors that I have? And I'm sitting around and I'm looking and I'm getting told like, there is no garbage dump here. Everything is good for somebody.
Yeah.
Whether it's a downed tree that then all these decomposers start to come and munch on, whether it's, the excrement of some kind of animal that fertilizes somebody else, like all plants have this natural way of expressing everything that they are, and it's going to be useful to somebody. Even what we call competition from the natural world is not what makes the world go round. It's a small part, and it is useful. It is like, this is the time when I need to use it. And so I use it for a select thing. I work on that competition and then off I go and I start to create these other types of relationships. And that was the aha of, wait a minute, nothing that I am, nothing that I love or I do or I'm capable of or anything is like wasteful or bad. I just have to find how it needs to be used. What is its particular purpose and how is it that enriches my life? And that got me onto an overarching sort of path that I started to take of getting into what are limiting beliefs, where do they come from? And I have a very different philosophy. Like they are things we put in place to protect us. And so 100%. I got into fear. I got into all these different aspects. And I started to realize that even for myself, so I'm an extremely, you'll hear me say this over and over again, I am a naturally negative person. I am one of these people that can look at something and immediately see all the flaws. And of course, you think that's a flaw because you're like, why can't I be more positive and all these types of things? When now looking at it from the perspective of, wait a minute, where is that useful? I realized that my problem was not the fact that I'm critical or the fact that I can really see flaws. It was the way I was using it. If it comes from my fear or my jealousy, of course, that is not going to be useful. But When instead I look at a project that somebody hands me and I can see the flaws in it, and I can look at it like, okay, tell me again what you were trying to do.
Yes.
And rather than just saying, hey, you're an idiot, you don't understand
Yeah,
this,
you don't get
I
it.
can
Yeah.
both say like, tell me what you're trying to do here, because, and then they tell me, and I'm like, okay, just so you know, this over here is not really going to make it. So how do we fix it? And you then go into other skills that you have. I realized that my criticalness was super useful. I had just been applying it wrong.
Yeah.
And nobody had taught me how to apply.
Well, and I think that, you know, I just spoke about this with Cheryl Burrows, who we released the episode this week. And and one of the main themes is that we have these boxes that we've created that the world has said, okay, you need to fit in there. And for instance, I love that you said, I'm a negative person normally. And then the box of the world says that's a bad thing.
Exactly.
But how can we use that propensity, right, and turn it around? And it's all a matter of really creating a shift in the paradigm and really understanding, right? And I think that going back to the conversation of someone who's a multipotentialite, multi-passionate, the world is saying, hey, it's bad that you get distracted. It's bad that you have all these interests. But for people who are listening to this, how can we help them in the path to maybe not view it as I'm in this bad box, or I'm in, you know, or this is my role, and rather defining themselves? And how can we get them to maybe use their intuition in a better way?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is to remember, again, that disconnection we have, that we separate ourselves from nature. When we realize that we're nature, it means that everything that I am and everything around me fits in somehow. Because if you go into an ecosystem, right, everybody sort of plays together in their own way.
Yeah.
And even what might seem, for example, like you said, negative or bad, for example, mistletoe is a parasite. Most people don't know that, but it's a parasite, which means it literally actually lives on branches and sucks from the branches. So you might say, oh, bad, got to get rid of. No, because mistletoe also then keeps those types of trees in check, makes sure that there's not too many of them, or that they don't start to overpower the entire. So you start to see, okay, these relationships that we've had have been kind of like too limiting. So if I look at myself also as an ecosystem, so when you go to an ecosystem, you have like a rainforest, a temperate rainforest, you have, you know, whatever, a jungle, like each one of them has a kind of continuing thread, a theme of what it is that makes that ecosystem. If I think of myself in that same way, so I am an ecosystem. I might love, again, like I said, playing the tuba over here, and I don't know, being in plays over there and listening to true crime and being an engineer and all these different things. And I think about what is the common thread, which might not seem so obvious, but it's more of the thing that I do in that. So for example, I'm a bridge. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. 99% of the time, what I do is bridge from one thing to the other. I help people cross the bridge. I hold their hands and I walk them, or I act as an interpreter to help something bridge a situation. It doesn't matter if I was doing it when I was in the circus, when I was even performing, when I was doing theater. If I was embracing that bridge side of me, then everything I did all of a sudden came together. I could understand how it all fits together. And as multipotentialites, we have this beautiful, beautiful way of learning from one thing, which they don't teach you this in school, but they should. Learning from one thing and applying it to the other. So, for example, learning the aerodynamics of my aerials, and watching my aerials when I was doing things connected to my circus, I learned a lot of things that helped me when I went back into engineering projects. Or by being really good at like the social media, I got into this like social dynamics. And so I'm very good at social innovation, and I can see big level projects. So the other thing that multi-passionates do well, but we're not taught to embrace it, is once you understand that continuous, first of all, what I call your deep pattern. In nature, we call it a deep pattern. Swarms of birds that fly in the air in a configuration really are only following one rule, and that is their deep pattern. We actually all have one deep pattern, or in Damanhur, we call it your elements, your soul elements. And it's something that you express always. And it doesn't matter which of your personalities is showing. It doesn't matter which one of your passions you're carrying out. That soul element always comes through. So once you discover that, everything clicks into place. And you start to realize that the only time that being a multi-passionate is a problem is when you use it to run away, which again, in an ecosystem, plants can't because they're sessile, they're rooted into the ground. So if you think like a plant, I start to say, okay, what is my deep pattern that I express? How then do I learn from one thing to pull it into the other? And then also, what am I running away from? Because those are the ones that I have to work on. Not the things that I keep calling distractions just for distractions. Those are probably lessons that are coming in strange and unusual ways.
Right.
But they are not distractions. Distractions are the things I do because I'm hiding, because I'm running away, which is
100%.
not natural. Not natural in the world. So it's little things like that, that when you start to recognize your own self and you look at a plant and you think, okay, this plantness that this plant exudes, what is it in me? I start to recognize all these parts of myself that society, as you said, has called bad or labeled it with all these things that isn't actually accurate. It's just that nobody's taught me how to use them. And I've never given myself permission to experiment and find how to use them.
Permission. I have a client and her show, and often she talks about in the work that she does about permission slips and writing our own permission slips. So I love that we're going into this conversation, because I think that we're, again, trained by the world, and it starts from a very early age. We have to ask permission. We have to ask permission. And then that disempowers us in some ways, because we're always waiting for the right time, the right thing, the stars to align, and yet
the confirmation.
Oh, absolutely. And when then we're not following, right, our own intuition. We're not following our own gut feeling, our check, and we end up being what I believe is misaligned in ways. Now, you teach alignment with plant intelligence, and I guess my question is, how did your relationship with nature begin to reshape your personal and professional life, right? Because you talked about all the multiple things that you did, and we're talking about giving yourself permission slips. And I would say that perhaps as you started to align yourself, right, because of your relationship with nature, right? But yeah, unpack that for me.
Yeah, that's a really great question, because my work with plants started through one of my passions, which is music, and really entering into a relationship with plants through something called the music of the plants, which is a device that allows plants to make music. And this was being that music and also electrical engineering, because again, I studied music engineering, was like two avenues that were clear to me. So when I could hear the music, it was like, oh my goodness, you're speaking to me. I understand you because I have that type of connection. And then the engineering side of me could understand how this device worked and how, okay, this really is allowing the plants. Like once I got into it, this really is allowing the plants to communicate. So that gave me my kind of proof. And once I started to do that, like you said, and give yourself permission to say, okay, suspension of disbelief. Plants really do think very differently than humans. I say that I call it our plantness is our presence. We're not present. We're so disconnected from our bodies, from our intuition, like you said, all these aspects. And a plant is sessile. A plant can't run away. So once you start to think of yourself as, okay, whatever's going on in my life, I'm rooted. I can't run away from it. So what can I do? I can either adapt, I can ignore, or I can, move to transform the environment that I'm in. right? So I can lay out a certain direction and start to shift. Now, none of that happens in a heartbeat. So the plants really helped me at first start to see things as like, okay, I am in control because again, I can't run away. So therefore I am in control of my environment and I have these options, right?
Yeah.
A plant can adapt. A plant can ignore, a plant can start to modify the environment. And the modifying of the environment doesn't always work acting on another. Oftentimes I've got to change maybe something in the soil, the pH level, or how I shade other plants. And that's going to make a change. So it started to give me a more, first of all, presence to evaluate and look at things without those conditionings. Because once you start thinking like a plant, you have to break down this, wait a minute, is that something that's coming from what I'm really reading? Or is that actually because I've been trained, I've been conditioned to look at things in that way? And what happens as a plant, because I can't run away, I've got to make lots of calculations. I've got to take in everything. And then I need to make calculations like, where do I put? Because I've got a limited amount of energy. I got to make sure the sun is shining for me to get more energy. And I need to make sure that these pieces and have to be in place. So you start to get to know yourself at a very, very different level. I mean, I spent the first maybe 10 years that I worked with plants in a very biological sort of way. Yeah, okay, there was a little bit of plant music, there has some emotion, but it was very kind of like I was following the biology and the intelligence of plants. And when you realize the way plants deal with situations, whether it's an attack of some sort or whether it's, and when also to just let go. Like, when does a plant allow themselves to just die off because this is not worth it? But then what do I do in order to prepare? Do I go to seed? Do I go to compost? Who am I in this? And why do I do this? So it starts to really, I always say that working with plants, first of all, takes you out of the human animal thinking, which is always great to kind of give us. And it allows you to come out of that and then come back into it, but from a different perspective without all that conditioning. Because now I've started to approach things from this sessile present, and that it is not about ignoring and running away, which is something we humans do way too well, but it's about instead saying, no, I've got to take it all in. It's kind of like when people talk to me about being, and of course I work with a lot of people who are super sensitive, but super sensitive, in my opinion, is just that you have a lot of senses that we as plants have, we've evolved with plants, right? So we have a lot of senses that we don't actually recognize anymore. For example, when people start to talk to me about, all of the Wi-Fi, of course, there's an electromagnetic field that you're immersed in, and we as humans no longer recognize that electromagnetic field. So it acts on me, not with me. As a plant instead, plants are always emitting and receiving this electromagnetic field, but they're tuned to it. They know how to tune. So the alignment really comes more from getting in touch with all your different senses, getting in touch with all these different parts of yourself, and really looking at the world as I am sensor. I am sensing everything. What of it comes from where? How does it apply on my body? And then what do I do with it from there?
Yeah, I was reading a little bit about plant music, and I was incredibly fascinated. So, from what I understood, for plants to create music, they do so, and I want to make sure I understood this correctly. They transmit electrical impulses, correct? And then you measure those, and then they're translated into different notes. Is that
correct?
What?
Yeah, that's the foundation. So a plant has, just the same as we have synapses that fire. So we have electrical currents running through our body. Plants also have it. And again, plants are much more attuned, so they can use these electrical currents much better. So what the music of the plant's device is, it measures the resistance, the impedance between a leaf and the root system of a plant. And therefore, then as the plant starts to learn how the different impulses that they're sending change the music, then they can start to consciously manipulate it and start to really use it as a musical instrument. So there's a learning process that you hear when you first connect a plant. And for me, it's always been super fascinating because even that music, as we know it, is also conditioned, like major chords and minor chords and diminished chords and like all the chords, the majority of the chords that we normally listen to are very much conditioned into our psyche. We're taught that that's what music sounds like. But when you give a plant the opportunity to make a music with a whole different configuration, now you're entering into relationship. Plants can also use the major scale. And I know of plenty of interspecies groups now that exist and that make gorgeous music that sounds like the music we're used to. But also there's this opportunity to go beyond that, to like say to the plant, okay, give me what it is that you want to create and like use that as a form, because we think of music as a language, but in reality, it's the opposite. Language is actually a musicality. It's music that comes first. We live our lives through harmony and melody and alignment of notes and all these different elements. If you think about it as a baby, before we're able to talk, right? We beat our drums, and you can teach children how to make music and such, because musicality is actually innate. And so language is just a melody of words of sounds that we then give certain
to
kinds
that musicality.
Exactly. So it's the musicality that's the base. And that's the reason why the music of the plants is so powerful.
Well, my mind is being blown, but you're right.
Yeah. And
so
I love
cool.
it. I love how I've now done music of the plants presentations and concerts all over the world. And I love seeing all kinds of different people who you can see their level of connectedness, disconnectedness to self. You see children who are like, come up to the plant and are just talking to the plants because of the music. And you're like, what are you doing? And they're like, what are you talking about, man? They're talking to me. Shush.
Yeah.
It's like,
that's very cool. Yeah,
that's
great.
Very cool. It's wonderful.
Well, I was thinking as I was preparing for the show, I don't know if we even talked about this when you and I first met, but I was the kind of person who always told myself that I could never keep a plant alive.
Me too.
And I thought, and for many years, that was my belief. And I had one existing plant that has lived with me for a long time, still here. And I called her Petunia. And every other plant that I would get, it's not a petunia, it's a cactus. And I would say, oh, this is Petunia 2, Petunia 3, and I would normally call them my victims because they were going to die at my hands. And until one day I realized that, wait a minute, I am putting out that energy to this plant that you are not going to live. Right. And it started to help me shift a little bit of my mindset that, and not only just with my relationship with my plants, but overall with things that, and that's the analogy, right? That we can see with nature, that we can, how we're showing up, right, in that relationship with plants is probably how I was showing up in other relationships. I was already making a judgment, already, got my whole scenario planned out of how was that going to play out. But it wasn't until I decided, hey, I'm going to relate to this differently. Or what if, right, I can do this differently? What would I need to do different to create a better interaction with this plant? Fast forward now, I have several plants that live in my house and are doing well. I'm not going to say thriving because, I always try to be a better steward of them. And I've planted roses outside. And also I love to talk about I do a lot of analogies from my relationship with them and how the roses grow in different times and how I have to prune them and how sometimes I don't even know what to do. But a lot of times they tell me, and it's a matter of just having a better awareness. Now, I thought as I was researching, wouldn't it be cool, right, if I could see what kind of music my plants and my roses are playing? Because I wonder if that is part of, right, because I'm investing myself into it. So I would imagine that there's got to be some of my, this is going to sound so weird, but some of my energy or thing.
It's a relationship.
Yeah.
It's a relational field. Yeah. It's one of the most beautiful relational fields. And it really helps us, working with plants really helps us understand that relational field. So we tend to think of things as like my experience, right? Yeah. I don't know, I did this meditation and I felt this, or I had this experience and this is what I went through. But in reality, it's always a we. because
Yeah.
it doesn't matter who it is that is there, whether we're talking about a plant, an animal, another human being, there is a relational field and so based on the experience that the other is having changes the experience that I'm having at a subtle level as well as on a physical level. It's not, and we see this in extremes when you have somebody who's like looks all grumpy, some human that looks all grumpy. Of course, your experience of something that you might be really having a great time in, but that grumpiness changes the way you experience that. With plants, the exact same thing happens. We have this relational field that gets formed. And so, yes, when you start to work with a plant, plus, I think one of the other concepts that's very hard for us is that plants have a different way of living their lives, like just straight up. Trees are way older than we are. A lot of plants are, for example, annuals. And so therefore, they're going to live and then they're going to die. And we have to go through these experiences. Now we tend to, again, we've been taught, like I buy the basil and then the basil dies and then that's it. But for example, I spent last year with a tomato plant and a few basil plants that ended up in my house. And that's a long story. I have a whole podcast episode about that myself. But it's like, it was all about, what are you supposed to be here for? Because I don't even eat tomatoes and I really kind of don't eat basil that much.
Yeah.
So why are you here in my house? What is it? What are we supposed to learn? And one part of it was about life and death. Like, what does it mean to live? What does it mean to die? All these different parts. So when we start really working with plants very closely, my business partner, which you can't see because my business partner is right off screen, but Noelle, the Christmas cactus, which is my second plant business partner. My first plant business partner was Spider Plant. Spider Plant was very chatty. Spider Plant was a healer. So Spider Plant was the one that I worked with during COVID. I created programs that were more about healing certain elements and all these different parts with Spider Plant. With Noelle, we work on very different things. Noelle is somatic. Noelle doesn't really talk. So Noelle is more about how connected am I to my body, which I disconnected for a long time. So Noelle's more about, I'm going to give you the nudge. I'm going to give you the feeling. I'm going to point you in a direction. And it's not going to come from a running vocabulary that's happening in your head like it did with Spider Plant. It's going to come in something completely different. And the only way I was able to start working with this plant was because the little plant that's behind me, which is lovingly call No Name Dracaena, who was a plant that literally told me, we're not going to talk. You need to move. If you want to hear me, if you want to understand what I have to share with you, the knowledge that we're going to work on, you need to move your body. And I was like, what? He's like, yep. And so that's a plant that taught me how to re-embody myself and has opened me up to a whole series of intuitions and understandings and deep senses and knowing the world around me and having a refined sense of self that no psychology book, no self-help book could have ever got, at least for my personality. I couldn't get there from there. Instead, this plant was more like, move. So literally, as you might notice, I use my arms a lot when I talk. I have to. I embody knowledge by the way that my body moves because it alchemically distills it so many different ways. And I only was able to get there because these plants, and so that has taken me, that my work went from being very analytical. As you can tell, I like to talk. I have an analytical mind. And much of my work has moved to a much more mystical side, a much more somatic side with senses and more deeper meditations and time in presence. And with my clients as a coach, it's fascinating to kind of sit in that silence, in that relational field, and allow my clients to use that relational field to express themselves and to discover pieces of them, which don't always come through the word. So we do a lot of drawing, we use a lot of movement, we use anything in order to get into your knowingness. Because like you said, we have been trained about permission and recognition and confirmation, and that if somebody doesn't confirm it, it wasn't good. I'm not good. I'm not worthy. I didn't do it right. Whatever the words you want to use.
Absolutely.
And when instead you re-embody yourself, you now know. You just know. You don't have to explain it to anybody else as to how you know or why you know. You just know.
You just know. There's so many different things that I want to get into, but I guess walk me through, because we are often told, again, the world says we're too much, we're too sensitive, too spiritual, scattered, and that we need to be a certain way to be successful. And walk me through what it looks like to build a life that flows, just like an ecosystem would, because I think that is incredibly fascinating to me.
So I'll give you an example of something that happened to me when one of those realizations that everything was flowing. So like I said, I live in Hogwarts for adults, the wonderful land of Oz.
Yeah.
So we have a very intense spiritual practice. Like, we are an esoteric society. We have missions that we're carrying out for humanity. It's very much a part of it. And one of the things that we have here in Damanhur is called the ways. And the ways are the way in which you express your spirituality. For example, one of the ways is the way of the oracle. So yes, there are oracles like the oracles of Delphi and the oracles from, the Matrix movie. Like, all these things exist, and it's people who enter into relationship with these divine forces. There is the way of art and work, which is when you elevate work to an artistic creation, to a creative process that becomes sacred. There's the way of art also, and the way of word for people who do theater and speeches and speakers of all different sorts and things like that. And mine is the way of the knights. I very much, as part of that bridge, one of the things that that is very important to me and has always been is creating safe space. I do, so as a knight, we do both the security side as well as the building. And my security side is a very, very strong. Like, I want my people to always feel safe. I always know what's going on around. I'm the kind that if you walk anywhere, I know what's going on. Like, you want to know who walked into the room 3 hours ago? Let me know. I know. Like, I'm just very hyper aware of those things. So at one point, I was talking to a friend of mine, and both of us have this love of plants, this work with plants. And he went down the route of a woods guide. He's a woods guide in the area. And I, of course, have the work that we've been talking about today. And then we were in a research group, in like a spiritual research group, where we were researching how the deep transformation that you experience from, this connection to nature. And then we were both happened to be knights, and we were in the kind of ranger side. So we were looking at survival training, and we were teaching people how to do survival training. And I was sitting down one day, and I realized, going back to the whole, like, it could look very scattered to people that I'm a coach over here and I'm a ranger over there, and over here I'm doing this research. But in reality, there was this harmony through them. And the skills that I was picking up between these, when you're doing survival training, you learn to work with fear in a completely different way. I still believe that fundamentally our fear comes from the reason why we get worried about money and why we get worried about housing. We get worried about a bunch of other stuff. And the anxiety is because we don't know how to take care of ourselves without it. Like, we don't know how to build shelter. We don't know how to forage for food. We don't know how to do any of these things. And as a girl who comes from the city, I had to learn all these things myself. I'm still not great, but at least I know that if I go outside, I can make it.
Yeah.
Well, I know how to, filter water.
Yep. I have a little bit of that knowledge. I did a very outdoorsy, outdoor bound kind of trip in which I was dumped in the woods for 36 hours by myself, and I did okay.
Good. And it changes you. It fundamentally changes you. There are some kinds of things that you're no longer afraid of. You're like, but I could survive. Like, I could survive if I have to.
Absolutely. And I think that sometimes we forget, right, when we don't practice, because I know I haven't been in the woods in a long time, and certainly that apprehension comes back. But at the end of the day, haven't had an experience, and this doesn't mean just being in the woods, but haven't had an experience in which you learn something, even though you're not in it all the time, you can figure it out, and it can come back to you. And I think that's what we forget.
And that's the same thing. That same feeling that you just talked about, you then, going back to the whole multi-passionate and going the alignment, is know now how to apply it in anything. Whether you're building on a business problem,
100%.
Whether you've got a friend that had this other situation, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
Those types of skills, life could throw almost anything at you, and you can take that and apply it. And that was exactly my point. The alignment for me, I started to realize that all these skills, it was when I became aware that I was able to cross-pollinate my skills. What made me so good in tech turned out to be what makes me a really great coach. It wasn't like the technical skills. It was it was understanding that I'm a bridge, and that the characteristic of a bridge that I bring out more than anything is, as my client says, I have one client who said to me, I love her for this. She said, I feel like I can tell you anything, the most horrendous thing coming out of my mind, and you will show me where it's useful. And it's because that space is so safe that she can say anything. And there's no judgment. There's no there's more like, where do we apply that? How could that be useful to you? And that safety comes and shows up in any of the groups I'm in. So I don't feel bad anymore when I'm the one in the back of a group. Like when there's a group going, I don't walk at the front. I always walk in the back. And people are like, oh, well, why are you walking in the back? You just want to isolate yourself. You're like, no, I believe in security and safety. And this feels comfortable to me to make sure that you're all okay. Now I'll walk in, I'll talk to you, I'll walk out, I will do, but also if there's somebody coming in, I might move. Like it's a natural part of who I am. And rather than judging it because it's outside of the norm for somebody else, knowing my element, that bridge, and knowing so clearly that part of how I manifest that is the translation. So that's why I love Kabbalah, for example, why I speak multiple languages, and why I understand cultures. So I'm really good in international, which is one of the things I do here for Damanhur. And then that security piece. How do I'm like, yesterday I facilitated one of our community meetings, one of our meetings connected to our spiritual path. I had 150 people online that I had to, work through a dynamic with 22 open, what are they called? Breakout rooms in Zoom, right?
That's
22,
huge.
5 different languages, 150 people, 5 languages. And I know that my job is 1, make them feel safe. 2, make them feel like this is a protected area where they can, open themselves to the work that we're doing. Translation of all the cultural elements. Okay, the Norwegians over here will have this difficulty, so use these little words. And the Croatians over here are going to have those words. And over here I've got the Spaniards, and over here I've got the Americans, and over here I've got the Italians. And I know, and the Germans versus the Austrians, which are not the same, notwithstanding the fact that they have the same language. And so you start to realize the skills that you have, and then you can easily accentuate them. Now there's other things that I can't do. Like I wouldn't be good in doing, some other, I don't know, kind of dynamic for them. The dynamics that I do, I know how to do them really well because the plants have helped me to see what my ecosystem is. What is my deep pattern inside of that ecosystem? And then how do I do that? And that's exactly what I take my clients to. I take them through the understanding of, you have to understand your deep pattern, whatever that might be. Why do you discover it? How do you work into it? How do you lean into it? And how do you start to see it? Going back to the whole attunement, how do I see it in its different manifestations? Because it's not always going to manifest itself the same.
So good. I could talk to you all day. This is like the funnest conversation I've had in the last few days.
Yay!
I'm intrigued, and you and I have talked about this as well. Damanhur has retreats for spiritual and intentional spiritual community. And tell me more about them, and how do people kind of get a hold of you, and how do they connect with you?
Yeah, luckily I'm pretty easy because everything I have is Tigrilla Gardenia. Period. Like one word. It's either it's either Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn, or YouTube, or it's my website. It's all the same thing. So that part is great. And there I have, of course, all kinds of information. Plus, I'm always available. You can find me. I have an online community as well called the Naturally Conscious Community, which again, you find from my website, to give again that safe space, because this transformation is different. It's cutting edge. It's way different way of saying it. And I want you to feel safe to be able to experience that. And then Damanhur, I'm happy to walk you through it. Damanhur has, like you said, a whole series of different things that we offer, from the Damanhur Fast, which is happening in August, which may be before or after, depending on when you listen to this, but it happens every August, so you can just come next year. But also we have lots of different single day visits as well as multiple day visits. And the multiple day visits have kind of a general direction. So there's a green consciousness one that's happening that we're, myself and two others of the teachers here that are very much connected to plants, are offering. But we also have alchemy inspired ones, ancient civilizations, past lives. I mean, we really have,
That's very cool.
It really is Oz. Like it really, really
you
is
have
Oz.
such an amazing array of offers and individuals, you know, that are available to just kind of guide you in an experience. And I think that it's very cool. I can't wait to visit, because it's, like you said, it's Oz, Hogwarts, all rolled into one. And there's that history about it, about, you know, and for individuals who have never heard of the Temple of Humankind, tell me a little bit more about that.
So you have to remember, Damanhur is celebrating its 50th year this year. So we're 50 years old, which is amazing to think about it. I mean, even for me to think I've been here 15 years is just like impossible to think about. But the Temples of Humankind, we started in 1978, and it's an underground cathedral. Some people call it the eighth wonder of the world, or the first wonder of the new world. And it's an underground cathedral that is completely dedicated to the excavation of self, right? The knowledge that the human being and that our connection to others has. And so therefore there are 8 chambers, each chamber dedicated to a different element or a different part of humanity's mission and of humanity's experience. And this goes back to ancient civilizations, not just the way we think of humans in the last 200,000 years, but really going back to our ancient roots from Atlantis and every other piece that is connected. And so the Temples of Humankind are really unique also because they're these, we carved them by hand out of the mountain. And so they're completely man-made by us, but also beautifully painted, because each one is an experience, and they're constantly in transformation, because it's not meant to be static. One of the only, we always say at Damanhur, the only constant is change. That's change. Like our dogma. Our dogma is change. And so therefore it is a place that is, like I said, the reason I like to use the example of Oz is because it really is what happens when you get to live your mission, your life purpose, your spirituality as a community, as a together, and you get to carry that out day after day. And that's when we can build the impossible, like where the impossible becomes possible. And that's one of the beauties that you see when you come into the Temples of Humankind. Plus, it's an opportunity for people to connect themselves with, you know, this knowledge base. So we have meditation. So we do visits, but we also do like single meditations for you to have your own experience inside one of the chambers. And I just highly recommend go online and just look up Temples of Humankind. And when you look at these pictures, you'll be like, no, that's underground.
And we're going to have the information in the show notes, along with where they can find you and all of the work that you're doing, your podcast. And I'm so grateful that you've taken the time to be here. One lesson, leave us with one lesson that you want us to implement that will be something that helps us in our journey to confidence.
I would say that the number one is that when you're in that overload, again, take a moment to step into your plantness, which is that part of you that's present, right? Your animalness is your instincts. It is really important. But in order for you to be able to hear your instincts clearer and hear the direction to take, you have to step into your presence. And presence doesn't mean tuning out. On the contrary, presence means quieting yourself in order to hear it all. So just flip that narrative slightly and think about, okay, what am I supposed to be listening to? And don't be afraid to bring the plants into this. You know, sit next to a plant, hold the pot, hold a leaf, and just say, you know, help me look at this from your perspective, and to go into my inner plantness and understand what is the sensor that I'm supposed to be focusing on in this moment.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for spending some time with me and allowing me to pick your brain and explore so many different things. So fun and fascinating. I can't wait to unpack more. And you're going to have to come back and visit.
Yay!
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much, Tigrilla. And my friend, if you're listening, go and connect, go and find out more about this incredible community and also the work that Tigrilla is doing in the world, because this is how we create a ripple effect, is by comparing ourselves to what the world actually has to offer us and being able to say, hey, I'm missing a little bit of that and I need a little bit more. So don't compare and despair, but compare and go find out what you're missing so that you can continue your journey to wholeness. So thank you, everybody. And until next time, don't forget, go confidently in the direction of your dreams.
Thanks for listening to Casa De Confidence. We thank you for listening. And if you want more, go to casadeconfidencepod.com. Check Julie out on her socials as Julie DeLucca-Collins. And you can also check out her website at goconfidentlycoaching.com. Have a great week, and don't forget, go confidently in the direction of your dreams.